Hello, I'm Peter. I'm so glad you could join me for tonight's journey. But here is a hard truth you need to hear. You probably wouldn't last a single night in the world I'm about to describe. Not because you lack courage, but because we have forgotten the brutal, intimate language of the cold. We live in an era of clicks and beeps, the steady hum of a furnace, the effortless slide of a thermostat. In the process, we've lost a crucial winter survival skill once passed quietly from one generation to the next. Tonight, we go back to the early 1800s, when winter wasn't just a season. It was an adversary that crept into walls and froze the very breath in your lungs. Survival depended on small, deliberate choices: how you slept, how you shared warmth, how you endured the long, dark nights. Before we test your will against the frost, take a moment to like and subscribe. And let me know, are you joining me from a drafty attic in London or a humid evening in Singapore? Now adjust your pillow. Pull your blanket a little tight. The year is 1847, and the world has turned into a wasteland of white and iron. Outside a small house on the outskirts of a Massachusetts town, the landscape has lost all its gentleness. The vibrant autumn golds are a distant memory replaced by a monochrome palette of slate-grey sky, blinding white drifts, and the jagged black lines of frozen elms. Snow has accumulated in deep drifts against the northern wall, and icicles hang from the eaves like glass spears, heavy and threatening. The wind doesn't just blow, it howls with a relentless predatory hunger, searching for any crack, any loose board, any weakness in your defenses. Step inside. The air here is still, but it is heavier cold that permeates more than just the floorboards. It probes for your soul. In the parlors and great halls of the wealthy, the air is vast and dead. But you have learned the first rule of survival to stay alive. You must make your world small. The family has retreated to the smallest bedroom on the second floor, just above where the kitchen stove radiates its precious heat through the floorboards. This is not the grand chamber you might imagine from period dramas. There are no high ceilings here, no expansive windows framing picturesque winter scenes. The room measures perhaps 10 feet by 12, with a ceiling so low that a tall person would need to duck beneath the central beam. The walls are thick, built from hand-hewn timbers, filled with a mixture of clay and horsehair, then plastered over with lime that has yellowed with age and smoke. There is exactly one small window, no larger than a schoolbook, set deep into the wall. During the day, it lets in a pale shaft of winter light. But as evening approaches, wooden shutters swing closed from the inside, and a heavy woolen curtain is drawn across the entire assembly. Frost has grown on the inside of the glass, intricate fern-like patterns of ice that feel like sandpaper to the touch. The door to the hallway is solid oak, nearly 2 inches thick, fitted so tightly that almost no air can pass through when it's closed. The wide pine floor, smoothed by generations of footsteps, is covered with braided rugs made from old dresses and work shirts. More than decoration, they block the cold creeping up from below and soften sound, turning the room into a quiet, insulated world, cut off from both the chill and the house's winter creaks. Everything about this space has been arranged with intention. The bed stands in the far corner, positioned so that 2 walls shelter it from drafts. The small fireplace on the interior wall, shared with the room below, radiates a gentle warmth, though no fire burns there now. The family cannot afford to waste fuel heating a bedroom, not when every log and every basketful of coal must be carefully rationed to last until spring. What strikes you most if you could step into this room on a winter evening in the 1800s is not the cold, though it is certainly present. What strikes you is the sense of compression of life contracted to its essential core. The room feels almost like a cocoon, your thermal cell, your fortress. A carefully constructed refuge where the vulnerable hours of sleep can unfold safely despite the hostile world just beyond these thick walls. Think about your own bedroom for a moment. How large is it? How many windows let the outside air press against thin panes of glass? Modern building codes often require bedrooms to be a certain size, to have a certain amount of window space for natural light and emergency egress. We've inherited the idea that bigger is better, that rooms should be airy and open. To a person in 1847, your bedroom would look like a tomb. People in the 1800s knew a quiet truth we've mostly misplaced while chasing big, airy rooms. Your body is never really off. Even at rest, it gives off about 100 watts of heat, like a small light bulb glowing patiently all night. In a large room, that warmth just wanders off, swallowed by all that cold, empty air. But tuck yourself into a small, well-sealed space, and something different happens. The heat lingers. The air nudges warmer, then warmer still, almost as if the room is leaning in to listen. Even the walls join the effort. Thick wood and plaster soak up that warmth and hold on to it like slow, dependable batteries, releasing it back to you, bit by bit, while the night stretches on. It's less about luxury and more about a quiet conspiracy between your body and the room to stay warm together. This was not theory to them. This was winter survival skill learned through generations of trial, error, and keen observation. You made the sleeping space as small as you could tolerate. You sealed every gap. You used heavy curtains and thick doors. You created what modern preppers might call a thermal cell, a pocket of relative warmth sustained by the careful management of heat sources and barriers. The woman of the house moves about the room now in the last light of dusk, making her preparations. She's done this every night of her adult life, and before that, she watched her mother do the same. There's a rhythm to it, a sequence of small tasks that mark the transition from day to night, from activity to rest. She isn't just cleaning up, she is fortifying. She pulls the curtain tight over the window, then runs her hand along the bottom of the door, hunting for drafts. A rolled blanket or rag seals the gap at the floor. She moves a heavy trunk against the outer wall to act as an extra layer of insulation, a chair set in the path of any wandering breath of cold air. Close your eyes now, if they aren't closed already, and imagine yourself in that room. Feel how the air is still almost heavy with its own quietness. Notice how the darkness is complete, not the semi-darkness of a modern night, with streetlights filtering through blinds, but a darkness so total, so suffocating, that you cannot see your hand in front of your face. In that darkness, your other senses sharpen. You hear the house creaking and groaning as frost works its way deeper into the timbers, a sound like bones snapping in the dark. You feel the sharp, icy prickle of air against your face, the only part of you left exposed, but beneath the covers that will soon surround you, your body is beginning to relax, knowing that warmth is near. The children have already been put to bed, 2 of them sharing a smaller bed against the opposite wall. Their breathing has already settled into the slow rhythm of sleep. They're young enough that they don't mind the crowding, young enough that they instinctively curl together for warmth like puppies in a litter. This, too, is part of the winter survival skill of the era. Shared body heat, shared breath, shared safety. Later, after the parents have finished their own preparations and climbed into the larger bed, the room will hold the quiet breathing of 4 people. 4 small furnaces, each producing its steady warmth, each contributing to the microclimate that makes this room survivable, despite temperatures outside that have dropped well below freezing. The great winter of 1847 doesn't care if you are comfortable. It only cares if you are alive. But as you lie there sinking into the straw mattress and the heavy layers of wool, you realize that comfort isn't something you buy with a thermostat. It's something you build with your own hands. Take a deep breath. Let it out slowly. Feel yourself sinking a little deeper into your own bed, into your own safety. We have time. We have the whole night ahead of us to explore these quiet mysteries of the past, and with each detail we uncover, I hope you'll feel yourself drifting closer to the same deep, peaceful sleep that found these people night after night, year after year, in their small, cold rooms, where comfort was something you created, not something you bought. 10 million ancestors slept like this, so that you could be here tonight. Let their strength carry you into the deep, restorative rest that only the cold can truly teach us. As we journey deeper into the night, we will discover the forgotten tricks of the hearth and the bed, the ancient rituals that turned a frozen house into a home. The bed commands your attention the moment you step fully into the room, even in the dim halo cast by the single candle the woman carries upstairs. This is not an elegant bed in the way we now imagine antiques with carved headboards or decorative flourishes meant to impress. This is a working bed, a serious one, built decades ago by someone's grandfather from local pine and oak, its joints locked together with mortise and tenon, fitted so precisely they have held firm for 40 years and will likely hold for 40 more. What makes it remarkable isn't beauty, it's intention. The bed is raised high off the floor, deliberately lifted, to give the cold air a place to sink and settle, drifting away from the sleeper instead of pooling beneath the body. In earlier centuries, this idea went even further. Medieval peasant beds were often enclosed with curtains or wooden panels, creating a small room within the room, a controlled pocket of warmth carved out of an otherwise hostile space. 4 sturdy posts rise from the corners, reaching toward the low ceiling. Between them stretches a lattice of thick ropes, woven tightly and pulled under tension. This is a rope bed, and the phrase "sleep tight" survives as a quiet echo of its maintenance. Every few weeks, someone would take a wooden key and twist the ropes where they passed through the frame, tightening them again, restoring firmness. The surface was meant to have some give, but never enough to sag. A bed that failed was not merely uncomfortable, it was dangerous in winter. On top of this rope, lattice rests a mattress, though nothing like the one you're lying on now. It's a large linen sack, thick and uneven, stuffed with whatever materials were available when it was made. Straw is common in farming households, though it must be replaced regularly as it compresses and begins to sour. Some families use dried corn husks shredded finely, which rustle softly with every movement, but offer decent cushioning. Wealthier households might afford feathers, usually chicken or goose feathers. Not the light down we associate with modern luxury. The mattress shifts as the woman presses along its surface, redistributing the filling, smoothing high spots, accepting low ones. By morning, it will need another shake, but for now, it's ready. Uneven, imperfect, full of subtle rises and dips. And that is precisely its comfort. Your body settles where it settles, and once it does, it stays. Movement takes effort. Effort invites wakefulness. Now comes the most crucial element, the difference between rest and a night spent shivering in the dark. The bedding. This is not a simple arrangement of sheets and a blanket. It's an engineering solution refined over centuries, a system so effective that modern science has only recently explained what experience taught long ago. If you're listening for comfort, for reassurance, for something like history to fall asleep, to this is where the past begins to whisper most clearly. She begins with the bottom sheet, a length of linen washed so many times it has become soft as silk despite its coarse weave. Linen matters. Cotton is still expensive in the early 1800s, but linen grows softer with age and manages moisture exceptionally well. Through the night, the human body releases a surprising amount of water vapor, and linen absorbs and releases it without ever feeling damp. In cold air, this matters deeply. Moisture steals heat. Dryness preserves it. The sheet is tucked in with practiced precision corners, folded tight, no looseness allowed. Any gap would invite cold air to creep upward through the layers. Over this goes another linen sheet, forming the first enclosed pocket of trapped air. Then the real art begins. The blankets. She lays down the first wool blanket, thin by modern standards, woven from the sheep kept just beyond the house. The wool still carries a faint trace of lanolin that natural wax sheep produce to protect their fleece. It hasn't been fully washed away because people have learned that lanolin helps wool repel moisture while still breathing. The blanket is tucked in at the foot of the bed, left looser at the sides. Then comes another blanket, slightly heavier, still wool, then another, and perhaps one more after that. Each blanket is not just added weight, it's another pause, another layer of still air held gently in place. This was the old secret. Warmth doesn't come from one heroic massive layer. It comes from many light ones stacked together, letting the air between them do the real work. Air, when trapped and still, is one of the best insulators we know. When it moves, it becomes a thief quietly carrying your heat away. When it stays put, it stands guard all night long. By the time she finishes, there are 5 blankets on the bed topped with a heavy quilt. The quilt is patchwork scraps, cut from worn clothing, each piece carrying a memory stitched together during long winter evenings of past years. It's filled with wool batting and heavy enough to serve as a final seal, pressing gently down on all the layers beneath. That weight is intentional. Altogether, the bedding may weigh 20 pounds or more. The heft keeps the layers from shifting, prevents gaps from opening, and settles over the body with a steady, reassuring pressure. It feels like being told quietly to stay. Long before science named it, people understood that this gentle weight calmed the body, softened the mind, and invited deeper sleep. Historical records from monasteries and castles show the same principle repeated again and again. Warmth was always built in layers. You didn't fight winter by turning night into summer. You moved gradually from the cold outdoors to a cool room, and finally into a small, carefully protected pocket of warmth inside the bed. Think of your own bed now. One comforter, perhaps a thin blanket beneath it. We've traded layered systems for simplicity, relying on furnaces to do what blankets once did. And most nights, that works. But remove the heat, and the difference becomes clear. One thick layer cannot compete with many thin ones working together. The woman steps back and surveys her work. The bed resembles a landscape now with soft hills and valleys of fabric. Later bodies will shape that terrain further, the blankets molding themselves, sealing gaps, improving their quiet efficiency. There is one final step in creating this night habitat. One more element that turns a cold bed in a cold room into a place where sleep can truly take hold. It requires fire, careful timing, and a tool most modern people have only seen behind museum glass. We'll come to that shortly. For now, imagine sliding between those layers. The brief coolness of linen against your skin. The slow arrival of your own warmth. The weight of the blanket settling, holding you, protecting you. The darkness complete. The house quiet, broken only by small settling sounds and the soft breathing of others nearby. In rooms like this, with thick walls and heavy curtains, people found a kind of peace many of us still seek. Not because their lives were easier, they were harder in almost every way, but because they learned how to create safety where none was given freely. That knowledge isn't gone. It's simply sleeping, just like you're about to. Rest now. Let your breathing slow. There is more to discover, but there is no hurry. The night is long, and the story unfolds the way snow falls softly, steadily, and without resistance. Outside the small bedroom window, beyond the shutters and the heavy curtain, winter has settled over the landscape with a weight that feels almost physical. The temperature has dropped to perhaps 15 degrees Fahrenheit, and a wind from the northwest carries the promise of more snow before morning. On the glass, invisible now behind its coverings, frost has formed in intricate patterns, fractals of ice growing outward from microscopic imperfections in the surface. This is not unusual weather for Massachusetts in the 1840s. What we now know as the Little Ice Age was drawing to a close, but its effects were still pronounced. Records from the period speak of winters when rivers froze solid enough to support wagons, when the harbour in Boston was choked with ice well into April, when farmers watched their crops fail year after year as summer never quite arrived with the warmth needed for grain to ripen. But here's what's fascinating, what's almost paradoxical. The people sleeping in that small bedroom under those layers of woolen blankets are in some ways better adapted to the cold than you or I would be. Not genetically, not because their bodies are fundamentally different, but because of a process that modern physiology calls cold acclimation, and which they would have simply called getting used to it. You see, their day did not begin in warmth and end in warmth with brief, uncomfortable exposures to cold in between. Their entire waking life involved cold. They rose before dawn in rooms where their breath frosted in the air. They dressed quickly, putting on layer after layer of wool and linen, their fingers clumsy with the morning chill. They went out to the barn, or the workshop, or the kitchen, and while there might be a fire there, it heated only a small radius. The rest of the space remained stubbornly cold. All day long, every day through the winter months, their bodies worked to maintain core temperature against the constant sapping effect of the environment. And here's the remarkable thing. Human bodies get better at this with practice. Modern science has finally put charts and lab coats around something people in the 1800s just felt. Spend enough time with the cold and your body starts taking notes. Circulation gets smarter, sending more blood to fingers and toes so they stop giving up at the first chill. A lesser-known kind of fat wakes up too, the heat-making kind, not the saving this for later kind, quietly burning warmth instead of storing it. Your metabolism nudges upward like a furnace turned just one notch higher, keeping you warmer even when you're doing nothing at all. Even shivering, that old sign of misery, gets a makeover. It becomes more efficient, less dramatic, more like a trained reflex than a full-body protest. In a way, your body learns the cold the same way people once did, by living with it long enough to stop fearing it and start working with it. What this meant, practically, is that a person in the 1800s stepping into a bedroom at 40 degrees Fahrenheit did not experience that temperature as the shock that you or I would. Their body had already made countless small adjustments throughout the day and the season. The cold was still present, still a factor to manage, but it wasn't the overwhelming assault on comfort that it would be for someone whose body had been kept at 72 degrees all day by central heating. There's a deeper truth here, one that speaks to how we've changed our relationship with the natural world. We've created what the scientist Bruno Latour calls a technological envelope around ourselves, a buffer zone of controlled temperature and humidity that we rarely step outside of. We go from heated homes to heated cars to heated workplaces, and back again. Even our brief exposures to cold, say, walking from the car to the store, are braced against and endured rather than adapted to. The people of the 1800s had no such envelope. They lived within the actual climate, not a simulation of endless spring. And while we might see this as a hardship, there were unexpected benefits. Their sleep, for instance, came more easily and ran deeper than what most modern people experience. Not despite the cold, but in some ways because of it. Think of your body as running on a quiet daily schedule. During the day, it turns the heat up a notch. At night, it gently dials it down. And that small drop is one of the ways your body whispers, "It's time to sleep." In a modern bedroom that stays stubbornly warm, that shift barely happens. The signal gets fuzzy. Your body has to hustle just to let go of heat. And if you're wrapped up like a burrito under heavy blankets, it's working overtime. Sleep doesn't arrive as an invitation anymore. It shows up late knocking while your body is still trying to cool off. But in that cold bedroom of the 1840s, the process happened naturally and efficiently. As people settled into bed, pulled the covers over themselves, and relaxed into stillness, their core temperature would begin to drop. Not dangerously, but enough to trigger all the neurological cascades associated with deep sleep. The circadian rhythm, that ancient internal clock that governs so much of our biology, could express itself more fully because it wasn't being overridden by artificial warmth. Moreover, there was the complete absence of artificial light. The candle had been blown out within minutes of everyone being in bed, partly to avoid the danger of fire, but mostly because candles were expensive, made from precious tallow or beeswax, and not to be wasted. Once extinguished, the darkness was total. No streetlights filtered through the windows. No alarm clock glowed on the bedside table. No phone screens illuminated faces with their blue-white glare. In that deep, honest darkness, your brain finally got a break. With no light bossing it around, the pineal gland slipped into its real job and began releasing melatonin. Not the weak stop and-go version we get in modern bedrooms full of glowing clocks and blinking chargers, but a calm, steady flow tuned to the old rhythm of night and day. As the air grew cooler and melatonin quietly rose, sleep found its ideal conditions. The kind of sleep we've mostly forgotten how to reach. Deep, slow stages stretched longer. Repair work ran uninterrupted, and the shift from one sleep cycle to the next felt smooth instead of jolting. People didn't just crash and vanish for 8 straight hours. They drifted into a gentler pattern, sleeping, waking briefly in the middle of the night to think, pray, whisper, or simply exist in the quiet, then easing back into sleep until morning arrived. Close your eyes now if they're not closed already. Feel the temperature of the air against your face. Maybe it's cool, maybe it's warm, but notice it. And notice the temperature beneath your covers, warmed by your own body, that pocket of your own climate you carry with you into sleep. Breathe in slowly through your nose. The air is cool as it enters just slightly, and as it travels down into your lungs, your body warms it. That's heat, leaving you energy being spent on the simple act of breathing, but your body has so much to give. Even at rest, even as you drift towards sleep, you are a furnace producing enough warmth to light a room, if only there was a way to capture it all. The people of the 1800s knew this instinctively. They knew that the cold outside was not their enemy, but their teacher, showing them where heat was being lost, where efficiency could be improved, where a blanket needed to be tucked tighter, or a curtain pulled more completely closed. In medieval times, this understanding ran even deeper. Monks slept fully clothed in their habits, bracing against the stone cold of their cells, staying warm not through added heat, but by wisely using the warmth their own bodies made. This is not a romantic vision of the past. Life was hard. Infant mortality was high, and cold was certainly a factor in many deaths, particularly among the elderly and the sick. But for healthy individuals who understood and applied the accumulated wisdom of generations, winter was survivable, and sleep, paradoxically, was perhaps more reliable than it is for many of us today, with all our modern advantages. The lesson here, the thing worth carrying forward into your own life, is not that you should make your bedroom as cold as possible or abandon your heating system. Rather, it's the understanding that comfort and adaptation exist in a relationship. When we insulate ourselves completely from challenge, we lose capacity. When we allow small exposures to discomfort, we build resilience. The optimal point is different for each person, but it lies somewhere between the extremes of constant, perfect climate control and the harsh exposure of a completely unheated space. Perhaps tonight or tomorrow night, you might experiment with dropping the thermostat a few degrees before bed. Not drastically, just enough to notice. Add an extra blanket instead of compensating with more heat. Notice how your body responds, how sleep comes, whether it feels different when the room is cooler. This is knowledge that preppers understand, that people interested in resilience and self-sufficiency recognize as valuable. When systems fail, when the grid goes down, or the fuel runs out, those who have maintained some connection to their own adaptive capacity will fare better than those who have outsourced all responsibility for their comfort to machinery and infrastructure. But even beyond preparedness, there's something to be said for sleeping closer to the rhythms that shaped human sleep for countless generations. Something to be said for darkness and coolness, and the weight of blankets that remind your primal nervous system that you are safe. You are protected. You are held. Let that thought settle over you like one of those woolen blankets settling over the people in that bedroom so long ago. Let yourself feel held by the simple laws of physics and biology, the same laws that kept them warm, that brought them sleep, that carried them through to morning after morning, winter after winter, their whole lives long. We're going to continue this journey, but at a slower pace now. Let your breathing find its own rhythm. Let the story unfold around you like the darkness unfolded around them. You're safe here. You're warm enough. And sleep, when it comes, will be as natural and complete as the sleep that found them in their small cold room, with their many layers and their hard-won wisdom about how to rest in a world that offered no guarantees, only opportunities for careful preparation and quiet trust in what had always worked before. Let me tell you something about wool that might surprise you. When you wear a wool sweater on a rainy day and it gets soaked through, you might expect to feel miserably cold. But wool, unlike cotton or most synthetic fabrics, retains much of its insulating property even when wet. The crimped structure of wool fibers creates tiny air pockets that persist even in the presence of moisture, and the lanolin in the wool actually helps repel water from penetrating to the core of each fiber. This is why sailors in the 1800s wore wool, why Arctic explorers bundled themselves in wool, why the blankets on that bed in Massachusetts were wool and not cotton, despite cotton being softer and more pleasant against the skin. Wool worked. It worked in ways that people understood from experience long before anyone could explain the science of it. Each blanket on that bed carried the weight of real time and effort. Sheep had to be raised and fed wool sheared, washed carded, spun into thread, then woven into cloth. The fabric was thickened, cut, and stitched by hand. One blanket could mean weeks of work stretched across the year. You didn't throw something like that away. You used it until it failed, then reused every last scrap. In a world made by hand, nothing went to waste. Long before modern factories making textiles was already hard, patient work, just with cruder tools and simpler methods. A peasant family might own only one or two blankets shared by everyone, handed down through generations, stitched and restitched so many times that the original cloth slowly faded into little more than a memory. The difference between medieval life and life in the 1800s was not one of kind, but of degree. By the 19th century, the Industrial Revolution had begun to make textiles more available and less precious, but they were still valuable enough that care in their use was important. The layering system on that bed was not random. The woman had placed the blankets in a specific order based on their weight and weave. The finest, thinnest blanket went closest to the bottom sheet, where it would rest against any exposed skin if someone shifted in the night. Then came progressively heavier blankets, each one trapping more air until the final quilt on top provided both weight and a barrier against drafts. These layers matter more than they look like they should. Press something too heavy and dense straight against your body, and it's like sitting on a cushion until all the air sighs out of it. The warmth escapes, and you're left wondering why that serious blanket feels oddly useless. Lighter layers solve this quietly and cleverly. Each one carries a bit of the weight above it, keeping tiny pockets of air fluffed and alive all the way through. Think of it as a well-organized crowd, rather than a single heavyweight leaning on you. The warmth doesn't get crushed. It stays suspended, comfortable and right where you need it. Modern sleeping bags use the same principle. The down or synthetic fill is distributed in baffles that prevent it from shifting and clumping, maintaining even loft all around the body. The difference is that a sleeping bag is designed to be portable and lightweight, while this bed was designed to be the warmest, most comfortable refuge possible within the constraints of available materials. Now, imagine the moment of getting into this bed. You've finished all your evening tasks. You've banked the fire downstairs, making sure it will last through the night without needing attention. You've used the chamber pot one last time because getting out of bed in the middle of the night means exposing yourself to the full cold of the room, and that's something to be avoided if possible. You've said your prayers perhaps at the bedside, feeling the cold floor through your stockings, speaking words that have been said in this house every night for as long as anyone can remember. Then comes the moment of transition. You lift the edge of the top quilt, then the blankets beneath it, creating an opening. The air that wafts out is cool, not yet warmed by any body heat. You slide in quickly, letting the layers fall back into place behind you, and for a few seconds, everything is cold. The linen sheet against your skin, the weight of the blankets pressing down but not yet retaining any warmth, the pillow still holding the chill of the room. But then, almost immediately, things begin to change. Your body heat, which has been radiating away into the open air all evening, now has nowhere to go. It begins to warm the layer of air closest to your skin. That warm air lighter than cold air wants to rise, but the blankets trap it. It spreads sideways instead, warming the linen, then the first wool blanket, then the spaces between the layers. Within 5 minutes, you're noticeably warmer. Within 10 minutes, you've created a microclimate inside the bedding that's 20 or 30 degrees warmer than the room. Your body hasn't produced any extra heat to do this. It's simply stopped losing heat to the environment, and that conservation makes all the difference. You lie still because movement disturbs the layers and lets pockets of cold air in. Your breathing begins to slow both because you're relaxing and because the slight increase in carbon dioxide in the air trapped around your face helps trigger the sleep response. The children in the other bed have already found their own warmth. They're curled together, one's head near the other's feet, creating 2 separate pockets of heat that merge in the middle. This arrangement isn't planned. It's simply what bodies do when they're cold and close together. They find the most efficient configuration without conscious thought, responding to subtle temperature gradients with tiny adjustments of position. As you lie there in your own modern bed, you might notice something. Perhaps you've shifted to find a cool spot on the pillow, or you've stuck one foot out from under the covers because you're too warm. These are temperature-regulating behaviors, the same behaviors that people in that cold bedroom employed, just in response to different baseline conditions. Your body wants to be slightly cool to sleep well. Not cold, certainly not uncomfortably chilled, but a bit below normal waking temperature. This is why hot summer nights make sleep difficult, why a fever disrupts rest, why some people run fans year-round, not for the air circulation, but for the cooling effect. In that room in the 1840s, the cool air on exposed faces, while bodies stayed warm under heavy blankets, created ideal conditions for this temperature balance. People would often sleep with their heads out from under the covers, breathing the cold air while their bodies rested in warmth. This combination stimulated deep restorative sleep, the kind of sleep where the body does its repair work, where memories are consolidated, where growth hormone is released and cells are renewed. There were other benefits too. The weight of those blankets pressing down evenly over the whole body activated pressure receptors in the skin that send calming signals to the nervous system. Modern science has rediscovered this in the form of weighted blankets, marketed as tools for anxiety and insomnia. But people in the 1800s had weighted blankets as a matter of course. The 15 or 20 pounds of wool and cotton and linen resting over them every night provided a constant, gentle pressure that soothed the autonomic nervous system and promoted parasympathetic activation, the rest and digest mode that's essential for true relaxation. The darkness helped too. In the complete absence of light, the eyes could truly rest. There were no patterns to track, no shadows to interpret. The visual cortex, that large portion of the brain devoted to processing sight, could quiet down in a way it rarely gets to in modern life, where even the faintest glow from an electronic device or street light keeps it partially engaged. And the sounds, or rather, the lack of intrusive sounds. No traffic noise from a nearby road, no airplanes passing overhead, no hum of appliances or HVAC systems, just the settling of the house. The sigh of wind in the eaves, occasionally the crack of wood contracting in the cold, or the distant sound of someone in another house letting their dog out one last time. These sounds weren't disturbing because they were familiar and harmless. The brain had already filed them away as part of the night. Unlike alarms or sirens that jolt you awake, these soft, uneven noises could even deepen sleep, quietly reassuring you that the world was still there, still ticking along as it should. Take a moment now to listen to the sounds around you. What do you hear? Maybe the hum of a refrigerator from the kitchen, or the whisper of air through heating ducts, or the almost imperceptible buzz of electronics. These are the sounds of our technological envelope, the constant background noise of modern life. They're not bad sounds necessarily, but they're different from what humans heard for most of our history. If you could silence all of those, what would remain? Your own breathing, perhaps. Your heartbeat, if you're lying very still. The sound of fabric rustling as your chest rises and falls. These intimate biological sounds are almost always present, but we rarely notice them under all the other noise. The people in that bedroom heard those sounds clearly. They heard their own aliveness, and the aliveness of those sleeping near them, and that connection to their own physicality helped ground them in the present moment, in a way that's hard to achieve when your mind is racing with worries about tomorrow or regrets about yesterday. This is one of the gifts that winter survival skills from that era can still offer us. Not the specific techniques necessarily, though those have value too, but the underlying approach. The idea that comfort comes not from controlling the environment completely, but from adapting to it intelligently. From using simple materials in clever ways. From understanding your body's needs and responses rather than overriding them with technology. You don't need to recreate a bedroom from the 1840s to benefit from these insights. But you might find value in adding an extra blanket and turning down the heat. In making your bedroom darker, quieter, cooler. In creating more layers in your bedding so you can adjust your warmth precisely by adding or removing just one layer. In noticing how your body responds to different temperatures and working with that response instead of against it. This is practical knowledge tested over generations, refined through countless cold nights and careful observations. It worked then. It still works now. And in times when the power might go out, when systems we rely on might fail, having internalized these principles could make the difference between a sleepless, miserable night and one where you rest securely, knowing that you have what you need, regardless of what's happening beyond your walls. Let yourself sink a little deeper now. Feel the support beneath you, the covering above you. Notice how your own warmth is building, how your body is doing exactly what those bodies did in that room long ago, creating a refuge of heat in the midst of cold. You are safe. You are warm enough. And sleep, when you're ready for it, will come as reliably as it came to them, night after night, winter after winter, through all the long years before electric lights and central heating made us forget how capable we really are. There is a tool hanging on a nail by the fireplace downstairs, and when the woman goes to fetch it, she handles it with the familiarity of long practice. It's a warming pan, sometimes called a bed warmer, and if you've ever seen one in an antique shop or museum, you might have wondered what it was for this long-handled brass or copper pan with a hinged lid perforated with decorative holes. The handle is perhaps 4 feet long, made of hardwood, worn smooth by years of gripping, and the pan itself is shallow, only a few inches deep, just big enough to hold a small load of hot coals without them piling too high against the lid. The metal has been polished by use, though in the dim light of the single candle it catches only the faintest gleam. She kneels by the kitchen stove where embers from the evening fire still glow red beneath a layer of ash. With a small shovel, she scoops out a portion of these coals and transfers them to the warming pan, moving quickly so they don't cool too much in the transfer. The lid closes with a soft click, and immediately the heat begins radiating outward, warming her hands through the long handle. She's done this so many times it's second nature now. But when she was newly married, living under her mother-in-law's roof, she had to learn it the careful way. Too few coals, and the bed had stayed cold. Too many, and the pan burned her hands, or worse, the sheets. She carries the pan upstairs carefully, mindful of the coals shifting inside. The perforations in the lid allow a small amount of smoke to escape, and it carries with it the scent of burning wood. A smell so familiar in this era that people barely notice it, the way we barely notice the smell of laundry detergent or air freshener today. In the bedroom, she pulls back the top quilt and the blankets beneath, exposing the bottom sheet. Then, moving in smooth, practiced strokes, she slides the warming pan between the sheet and the mattress, working it back and forth across the width of the bed, then up toward the pillows, then down toward the foot. The metal pan glides easily over the smooth linen, and wherever it passes, it leaves warmth behind. This is not a gentle, gradual warmth. This is immediate, almost fierce heat that seeps through the linen and begins driving the cold out of the mattress filling. She works systematically, making sure to cover every area where someone will lie, paying special attention to the foot of the bed, where cold tends to settle and linger. After several minutes of this, she withdraws the warming pan and carefully empties the still glowing coals back into a metal bucket she's brought up for this purpose. The coals will cool through the night, and in the morning can be mixed back into the ash bucket downstairs. Nothing is wasted. Even the residual heat in the metal of the pan itself will be used as she sets it briefly against the cold window to take some of the chill off the glass before returning it to its place downstairs. Now she remakes the bed, spreading the blankets back into place. And when her hand touches the sheet where the warming pan has been, she feels warmth that will last for at least half an hour, perhaps longer. By the time that warmth dissipates, the people in the bed will have created their own heat, and the initial shock of cold sheets will be avoided entirely. This might seem like a small thing, this warming of the bed before sleep. But in the context of winter survival skills from the era, it was crucial. The human body preparing for sleep is already working to lower its core temperature slightly. If you compound that natural cooling by putting someone into a bed that's actively cold, it can trigger a stress response that makes falling asleep difficult. The body wants to shiver to increase muscle activity to generate heat, and shivering is antithetical to the relaxation needed for sleep. By pre-warming the bed, you bypass that initial shock and allow the transition to sleep to happen smoothly. The body relaxes into warmth rather than tensing against cold. Heart rate and breathing slow naturally rather than elevating in response to the stress of sudden chilling. In households that couldn't afford a warming pan, people used other methods. Bricks heated in the oven or on the stove could be wrapped in flannel and placed at the foot of the bed. They held heat even longer than a warming pan because of their mass, and some people kept them there through the night, refreshing the wrapping as needed if it got too hot. Ceramic hot water bottles filled from the kettle and stoppered tightly were another option. These were safer than loose coals because there was no risk of fire, and they provided a localized source of heat that could be moved around under the covers as needed. A hot water bottle at your feet and another at your lower back could keep you comfortable through most of a cold night. In medieval times, the methods were cruder, but based on the same principles. Stones from the hearth wrapped in rags, metal containers filled with hot water, even bags of grain that had been warmed by the fire. Medieval life required this kind of resourcefulness because fuel was precious and you couldn't afford to heat an entire room when all you really needed to heat was the space immediately around your body. The key insight, whether in the 1400s or the 1840s, was the same heat, the person, not the space. Or, more precisely, heat, the micro-environment around the person, the small volume of air trapped under blankets, rather than trying to raise the temperature of the entire room. This is energy efficiency in its most fundamental form. Modern preppers and survivalists are rediscovering this idea when they plan for power outages or fuel shortages. They talk about building warm spaces inside larger rooms, pitching tents indoors, and layering sleeping bags and blankets. It's old wisdom in new packaging, the same winter survival skills people once learned out of necessity and passed down over generations. Think about what happens in your own bedroom if the heat goes out on a cold night. Probably your first instinct is to pile on more blankets, which is good. But if you've never slept in a truly cold room before, you might not realize that the bed itself, the mattress you're lying on, can act as a heat sink, drawing warmth away from your body all night long. This is especially true of modern foam mattresses, which have excellent insulating properties when warm, but can feel devastatingly cold when the room temperature drops. Knowing how to pre-warm your sleeping space becomes crucial knowledge in those situations. You don't need an antique warming pan. A modern hot water bottle works beautifully, or even a few bottles filled with hot tap water and sealed tightly. Place them in the bed 15 minutes before you plan to sleep, and you'll find the transition much more comfortable. The woman has finished her preparations now. The bed is warm and ready. The children are already deep in sleep, their breathing slow and regular. Soon she and her husband will climb in, and within moments the warmth from the warming pan, their own body heat, and the insulating effect of all those wool blankets will combine to create a sleeping environment that, while certainly not luxurious by modern standards, is nonetheless comfortable enough that sleep will come easily and last through the dark hours until dawn. Outside, the temperature continues to drop. Snow has begun falling, small dry flakes that will accumulate through the night. By morning, there will be several new inches on the ground, and the world will be hushed under a blanket of white. But inside this small room, protected by thick walls and careful preparation, none of that matters. The cold can do what it likes out there. In here, warmth and rest prevail. As you lie in your own bed tonight, you might not have a warming pan or a hot brick, but you have your own methods of creating comfort. Maybe it's an electric blanket or a space heater. Maybe it's just knowing how to arrange your covers in the right layers, how to tuck yourself in snugly, how to position your pillow so your neck doesn't get cold. These small rituals matter. They signal to your brain that sleep is coming, that the transition from day to night is happening. They're the modern equivalent of the warming pan's slow passage back and forth across the sheets, the careful banking of the fire, the checking of the door latch one last time before climbing into bed. We still need these rituals, perhaps more than ever, in a world that moves so fast and demands so much. Taking 10 minutes to properly prepare for sleep, to create the right conditions in your bedroom, to signal to your body and mind that it's time to rest. This isn't wasted time. It's an investment in the quality of the next 7 or 8 hours, and by extension, in the quality of the day that follows. The people of the 1800s understood this implicitly. They had to. Sleep wasn't a luxury to be squeezed in around work and social obligations. It was a necessity as essential to survival as food and water. And like food and water, it required some effort and knowledge to obtain reliably. Let that knowledge settle over you now, like the warmth from the warming pan settling into the mattress. Let yourself feel the care that went into creating conditions for rest, both in that long-ago bedroom and in your own space tonight. You are worthy of that care. Your sleep is important. And the time you spend preparing for it, arranging things just so, is time well spent. Close your eyes if they're open. Feel the warmth around you, the support beneath you. Notice how your breathing has slowed, how your muscles have begun to relax. This is your body remembering what it knows how to do, what it has always known how to do. Sleep is not something you have to try to achieve. It's something you allow by creating the right conditions and then letting go. In a moment, we'll continue our journey through this winter night, exploring more of the small wisdoms and careful practices that made sleep possible in such a different time. But for now, just rest here. Let the warmth build. Let the darkness hold you. There's nowhere you need to be, nothing you need to do. The night is long and patient, and sleep will find you in its own time, as reliable as sunrise, as natural as breathing. In the corner of the bedroom, hanging from pegs driven into the wall, you can just make out the shapes of nightclothes waiting for their wearers. These are not the simple pajamas we know today, the lightweight cotton sets or oversized t-shirts that many people sleep in. These are garments engineered for warmth for survival through the night in a room that might drop to near freezing by morning. The nightshirt, made of linen or cotton flannel, extends down to mid-calf. It's cut full and loose to allow movement while still providing coverage, and the fabric has been washed so many times that it's soft as butter despite its sturdy weave. Long sleeves reach to the wrists, and there's often a collar that can be turned up to protect the neck. This is not a garment designed for romance or fashion. This is functional clothing, as practical in its way as work clothes designed to keep body heat close while allowing enough ventilation that you don't wake up soaked with sweat. But the nightshirt is only the beginning. On colder nights, people would wear woolen socks to bed, thick knitted affairs that come up nearly to the knee. Your mother or grandmother made these socks using yarn she spun from wool. She carded from fleece she helped shear. Every stitch represents labor, and you don't waste them. You pull them on, carefully settling them into place, feeling the cushioning softness of the wool against your skin. And then there's the nightcap. To modern eyes, the nightcap is almost comical, the stuff of Dickens illustrations and cartoons about Scrooge. But there was nothing funny about it to the people who wore one every night. Quite the opposite. The nightcap was essential. Here's why the human head, despite making up only about 8% of body surface area, can account for up to 40% of heat loss from the body. This is because the brain needs to stay at a very constant temperature to function properly. And to maintain that temperature, the body keeps blood flowing to the head at a high rate, regardless of how cold the extremities might be getting. All that warm blood passing close to the surface of the scalp is an opportunity for heat to escape into the environment. In a warm room, this doesn't matter. The heat loss is negligible. But in a cold room with cold air circulating around your head all night, the amount of heat you can lose through your scalp is significant enough to make the difference between comfortable sleep and restless shivering. The nightcap solves this problem elegantly. Made of wool or sometimes linen shaped like a long stocking cap that can be pulled down to cover the ears and tied under the chin. If needed, it traps a layer of air against the scalp and prevents that convective heat loss. Suddenly, your body doesn't have to work as hard to maintain temperature. You can relax more completely and sleep comes easier. In medieval times, similar head coverings were standard for sleeping, especially in drafty castles, where wind could find its way through every gap in the stone walls. Medieval peasants and nobles alike understood that protecting the head was as important as protecting the torso when it came to staying warm through the night. Medieval life, with its constant threat of cold, taught these lessons well. The woman slips into her nightdress, feeling the cool fabric against her skin for just a moment before her body warmth begins to fill it. She pulls on her woolen socks and ties on her nightcap, tucking her hair up into it so it won't tangle during the night. Her husband does the same with his nightshirt and cap. These are their sleeping uniforms worn every night from October through April, packed away in cedar during the summer months when they're not needed. You might think that wearing all this clothing to bed would be restrictive, uncomfortable. But remember, these garments are loose and soft. They don't bind or constrict. They move with you as you shift position during the night. And the warmth they provide is immediate and personal, not dependent on external heat sources that might fail or fluctuate. This is a key principle in winter survival skills. Layer your clothing. Don't rely on a single thick garment, because if that one layer fails or gets wet, you have nothing. But with multiple thin layers, you can adjust your warmth by adding or removing pieces. And if one layer is compromised, the others still provide protection. The same principle applies to sleep clothing. The nightshirt is one layer. The socks are another. The nightcap is a third. Together, they create a system that's adaptable and resilient. If the room is especially cold, you might add a woolen vest over the nightshirt. If it warms up unexpectedly, you can remove the cap while keeping the rest. Compare this to how most people sleep now. In our climate-controlled homes, we've gone to the opposite extreme. We keep the bedroom warm enough that we can sleep in minimal clothing, often just underwear or light pajamas. This makes us completely dependent on the heating system. If it fails, we're immediately uncomfortable because we have no other layers to draw on. There's another layer to this. Sleep turns out to like contrast. Your body rests best when your skin feels a little cool while your core stays comfortably warm. That balance helps your system ease into sleep. Crank the bedroom heat too high and strip down too much, and you blur that contrast. Your body starts working when it should be winding down. People in the 1800s, not by careful planning, but by sheer necessity, stumbled into the sweet spot. The room stayed cold, keeping faces and airways crisp and cool. Under the blankets, though the body was cocooned in warmth, wrapped in nightclothes and layered covers. Socks and long sleeves kept hands and feet, happy circulation steady, while the core gently cooled just enough to invite sleep. It sounds old-fashioned, but the body doesn't care about trends. It still falls asleep the same way. The result was sleep that came quickly and ran deep, without the distraction of being too warm or experiencing the anxiety of being cold. The mind could quiet down and the body could relax into its natural sleep architecture. The cycles of REM and non-REM sleep could unfold without interruption, allowing for the full restorative process that sleep is meant to provide. Think about your own sleep clothing for a moment. What are you wearing right now as you listen to this? Is it enough to keep you comfortable if the heating stopped working? Could you add a layer or two if needed? Or are you already at the limit of what you'd find tolerable? These questions matter. Recent winters have shown how fragile our comfort really is, with storms and strained power grids leaving millions without heat for days. The people who knew how to layer, who had warm sleepwear and extra blankets, got through it far better than those who depended entirely on central heating. This is preparedness at its simplest. Not bunkers or stockpiles, just knowing how to stay warm when systems fail. Our ancestors didn't call it preparedness. For them, sleeping warmly in a cold house was simply part of life. The woman climbs into bed, now followed by her husband. They've blown out the candle, and the room is completely dark. They arrange themselves under the covers, finding comfortable positions, pulling the blankets up to their chins. The night clothes they wear add another layer to the insulation system, trapping body heat even more effectively than blankets alone could do. Within minutes, the space inside the bedding has become noticeably warmer. The combination of pre-warmed sheets from the warming pan, body heat from two people, multiple blankets, and insulating nightclothes creates a microclimate that's comfortable, despite the ambient temperature in the room being well below 50 degrees. They speak to each other in quiet voices for a few minutes, reviewing the day, making plans for tomorrow. This pillow talk, this intimate conversation in the darkness, is one of the pleasures of married life that transcends time and technology. Then, the talking trails off. Breathing slows. The day's tensions begin to release. Across medieval Europe, from stone castles to humble cottages, the same nightly ritual unfolded. People approached sleep with care, layering and insulating themselves, finding calm even as the cold pressed in from every side. Records from the time suggest this wasn't a luxury reserved for the wealthy. What changed between classes was the quality of materials, not the shared understanding of how to sleep well in the cold. The children in the other bed have not stirred through all this activity. They're deep in the sleep that comes easily to the young, their bodies curled together like quotation marks, sharing warmth the way they share everything else in their lives. Tomorrow they'll wake and go about their work, which in winter means hauling water and feeding animals and helping with endless small tasks that keep the household running. But tonight, they rest. And you can rest too. You don't need to wear a nightcap or wool socks to sleep well, though you might find they help if you try them. What you need is the understanding that your body knows how to regulate its temperature if you give it the right tools. Layering is one of those tools. Creating a cool environment for your face and airways while keeping your core warm is another. You might experiment with this. Try sleeping in long sleeves and pants instead of shorts and a t-shirt. Add a pair of soft socks. See if you can drop the bedroom temperature a few degrees and compensate with clothing layers instead. Notice how your sleep changes, whether you fall asleep faster, whether you wake less during the night, whether morning finds you more refreshed. This is empirical knowledge, the kind you can test for yourself. It costs nothing but a small willingness to experiment. And what you learn might serve you well, not just for better sleep, but for resilience in times when the systems we depend on might not be there. Let your body settle more deeply now into whatever you're wearing, whatever you're lying on. Feel how your own warmth is building around you, how every breath you take adds a little more heat to the space beneath your covers. You are your own furnace burning fuel from dinner, producing steady warmth that asks only to be contained, not created. This is an ancient truth old as humanity itself. We carry our warmth with us. We only need to be wise about keeping it close. The people of the 1800s knew this. Medieval peasants knew it. Every generation that survived cold winters without modern technology knew it. And now you know it too. Rest in that knowledge. Let it be a blanket of its own wrapped around your mind as the physical blankets wrap around your body. You are safe. You are warm. And sleep, when you're ready for it, will come as naturally as night follows. Day, as reliable as the breath moving in and out of your lungs. As gentle as snow falling on a quiet winter evening when all the world is at peace. Morning came early in the winter of 1847, though early is perhaps the wrong word when sunrise didn't happen until well past 7 o'clock. The family would wake in darkness, roused by necessity rather than light, knowing that animals needed feeding and fires needed tending regardless of how cold the house had become overnight. The first person to rise, usually the husband, would steel himself for a moment, then throw back the covers and move quickly to pull on his day clothes, which had been warming slightly under the bed from the heat that seeped through the mattress during the night. Even so, The clothes were cold, and putting them on was an act of will, a small violence against the comfort of the warm bed. His breath clouded in the air as he dressed, fingers clumsy with cold as he worked the buttons. Down to the kitchen, where last night's coals would need to be uncovered and coaxed back to flame fresh wood, added carefully so as not to smother the fragile fire. This was skilled work requiring judgment and patience, and it had to be done while your hands were still numb and your body was demanding that you retreat to warmth. But there was no warmth to retreat to. The only warmth available was the warmth you created through work. So you worked. You split kindling if needed. You carried water from the well or the pump ice-cold water that made your hands ache. You fed the animals moving through barn spaces that were sheltered from wind but barely warmer than outside. You did all of this before breakfast, before the day even truly started. And you did it in the cold. This daily exposure to cold, repeated every morning of every winter for their entire lives, did something to people's bodies that we're only now beginning to understand through modern physiology research. It made them, in a very real sense, adapted to cold in ways that most people today are not. When you're regularly exposed to cold, your body changes. Your blood vessels learn to constrict and dilate more efficiently, maintaining core temperature while still providing adequate circulation to your extremities. Your metabolism shifts, slightly burning fuel more readily to produce heat. Your perception of cold changes too. What once felt intolerably uncomfortable becomes merely unpleasant, then merely noticeable. Then finally just a fact of existence, no more remarkable than the color of the sky. People in the 1800s were cold habituated by default. They had no choice. From childhood, they experienced cold as a daily reality. In medieval times, this was even more pronounced. Medieval life meant living in stone buildings that were impossible to heat. Adequately meant working outdoors in all weather, meant accepting cold as one of the fundamental conditions of existence. The children in that household learned cold habituation almost from infancy. They were bundled warmly, yes, but they were not kept in overheated rooms. They played outside in winter, their cheeks turning red with cold, their fingers going numb in mittens that were warm enough to prevent frostbite, but not warm enough to completely eliminate discomfort. And their bodies learned. They learned to maintain circulation, to produce heat efficiently, to tolerate discomfort without panic. By the time they were adults, cold was not something that happened to them. It was something they moved through, worked in, lived with. It shaped their routines and their architecture and their clothing choices, but it did not dominate their consciousness the way it might dominate ours if we suddenly found ourselves without heat. There's a lesson in this for modern preparedness. If you want to be truly resilient in the face of potential winter emergencies, you need to maintain some baseline level of cold adaptation. This doesn't mean torturing yourself with unnecessary discomfort. It means not insulating yourself so completely from cold that your body forgets how to deal with it. Practical applications might include keeping your house a bit cooler in winter, perhaps 65 degrees instead of 72. Taking walks outside in cold weather instead of always driving. Spending time in unheated spaces like garages or basements. Allowing your bedroom to be cool at night, even if the rest of the house is warm. These small exposures maintain your cold adaptation without creating serious discomfort. They're insurance against the day when the heating system fails, and you need your body to be able to cope with temperatures that it hasn't experienced in years. Winter survival skills aren't just about having the right equipment or supplies. They're also about maintaining the physical and mental capacity to endure when comfort isn't available. But there's another aspect to this daily cold exposure that people in the 1800s experienced something that went beyond just physical adaptation. There was a psychological component, a kind of mental toughness that came from regularly facing and overcoming discomfort. Every morning getting out of bed was hard. Every time you had to go outside to the privy or the well, you had to overcome the resistance your body and mind put up against the cold. These were small acts of courage, repeated so often they became automatic, but they were courage nonetheless. And this daily practice of doing hard things, of pushing through discomfort, created a baseline resilience that extended into other areas of life. When you've gotten up in a freezing room and split firewood before breakfast every day for 40 years, other challenges seem less daunting by comparison. You've proven to yourself that you can endure, that discomfort is temporary, that doing what needs to be done is possible even when it's unpleasant. This is what modern psychology calls building distress tolerance, and it's recognized as a crucial component of mental health and resilience. People with high distress tolerance can cope with difficult situations without falling apart or resorting to avoidance behaviors. They can sit with uncomfortable emotions, endure physical discomfort, and keep functioning when conditions are far from ideal. People in the 1800s built distress tolerance through daily necessity. They didn't have a choice about whether to face the cold or avoid it. And while we wouldn't want to go back to that level of daily hardship, there's value in choosing to face some level of discomfort regularly, in not making life so comfortable that we lose our capacity to cope with difficulty. Pause and look at your own life. How often do you choose discomfort on purpose? Not because you must, but because you know it's good for you. For most of us, almost never, we've built lives around comfort heating and cooling our homes, smoothing every rough edge, dodging stress wherever we can. The irony is that this makes us less resilient. When discomfort inevitably shows up, a power outage, a broken car, some small everyday crisis, we're out of practice. With no tolerance built up, minor problems start to feel like disasters. The people sleeping in that cold bedroom who would wake to that cold morning and face it with resigned determination had something we've lost. Not because they were better or stronger than us fundamentally, but because their circumstances had given them practice. Practice in facing cold. Practice in doing hard things. Practice in maintaining function and even finding moments of joy despite conditions that were objectively difficult. And here's something else worth considering: their sleep. That deep, restorative sleep they fell into night after night was partly a result of the physical exertion required by their daily life in the cold. Cold exposure burns calories. Working in cold weather burns even more calories. By the end of the day, their bodies were genuinely tired in a way that many of us living sedentary lives in climate-controlled spaces rarely experience. Sleep for them was not something to be chased or managed or optimized. It was the inevitable consequence of a body that had worked hard all day and was ready for rest. Add to that the cold bedroom creating ideal temperature conditions, the complete darkness supporting melatonin production, and the absence of psychological stress about whether they'd sleep well, and you have a recipe for the kind of deep, dreamless sleep that modern people often struggle to achieve despite every comfort our era can provide. There's an irony there. We've created conditions that should theoretically make sleep easier. And yet, insomnia and sleep disorders are epidemic. Meanwhile, people sleeping in rooms cold enough to frost their breath often slept soundly through the night and woke feeling rested. The difference isn't in the bedroom conditions per se, but in the entire pattern of daily life that led up to sleep. You can't recreate that pattern entirely without recreating the whole context of 1800s life, which neither practical nor desirable. But you can incorporate elements of it. You can choose to be a little less comfortable during the day. You can take a walk in the cold. You can turn down the thermostat. You can do some physical work that genuinely tires you. And you might find, as you make these small adjustments, that sleep comes more easily. Not because any one intervention is magic, but because you're moving back toward the conditions that human sleep evolved to accommodate. We're meant to be a little tired at the end of the day. We're meant to experience some temperature variation. We're meant to face and overcome small challenges regularly. These aren't bugs in the human design. They're features. And when we eliminate them entirely in our quest for comfort, we eliminate something essential to our well-being. Let yourself feel that now. Let yourself acknowledge any tiredness in your body, any fatigue from the day. Don't fight it or regret it. Welcome it. This tiredness is your body's way of saying it's ready to rest, ready to repair, ready to do the work of sleep that can only happen when you let go of waking. The people in that bedroom understood this instinctively. They didn't wonder whether they'd sleep well. They simply got into bed when night came and work was done, and sleep found them. Not because they had perfect conditions or special techniques, but because they were tired from a day of work. Their bodies were adapted to the cold, and their expectations were aligned with reality. You can have that same simple certainty, not by changing everything about your life, but by changing a few small things, by accepting a little discomfort, by moving your body, by creating the conditions for sleep, and then trusting that your body knows what to do. Rest now. Let the story of their cold mornings and their hard work drift into the background. You don't need to do any of that work tonight. You only need to rest, to let your body temperature drop slightly as sleep approaches, to feel the weight of covers over you, to breathe slowly and deeply and allow the transition into sleep to happen in its own time. You are safe. You are warm enough. And sleep, that ancient process that kept those cold weather workers rested and ready, is ready for you too. The darkness in that bedroom was not just the absence of light. It was a presence of its own, thick and complete, the kind of darkness that city dwellers today rarely experience. No streetlights glowed through the curtained window. No digital clock display marked the passing hours. No phone screen lit the space with its ghostly blue glow. When the candle was extinguished, darkness arrived all at once, absolute and uncompromising. And in that darkness, remarkable things happened to the sleeping brain. Deep behind the eyes sits the pineal gland, once imagined by Descartes as the seat of the soul. Today, we know it as something just as fascinating, a light-sensitive clock that controls melatonin, the hormone that guides sleep and wakefulness. Light, especially blue light from screens and LEDs, tells this clock it's still daytime, so melatonin is held back. As darkness settles, melatonin is released, rising through the evening and peaking at night. The problem is that this system evolved for bright days and truly dark nights. Evening artificial light sends mixed signals, delays melatonin, and quietly disrupts sleep. People in the 1800s and their completely dark bedrooms had no such confusion. Once the candle was out, their pineal glands received a clear, unambiguous signal. It's night. Time to sleep. And melatonin flowed freely, doing its work of lowering body temperature, reducing alertness, promoting that drowsy feeling that leads into sleep. But the darkness did more than just support melatonin production. It changed the very structure of sleep itself. In the 1990s, historian Roger R. Kirch stumbled on a small but startling secret while digging through old European records. Tucked into diaries, court files, medical notes, and stories was a different idea of sleep altogether. People didn't just fall asleep and stay that way. They had a first sleep, then they woke up. Not in a panic, not because something was wrong, but because that was the plan. After dark, they'd sleep a few hours, drift awake in the middle of the night, and spend that quiet window praying, whispering with a spouse poking the fire back to life, or getting a little closer under the blankets. Then when that gentle pause had run its course, they'd slip back into a second sleep and rest until morning. What we call insomnia today was once just the middle of the night. This wasn't insomnia. It wasn't considered a sleep disorder. It was just how sleep happened in an era when nights were long and dark and there was nothing to do after sunset but rest. Medieval life, with its even longer winter nights and lack of artificial lighting, likely followed similar patterns. Though documentary evidence from that era is harder to come by. When E. Kirch published his findings, sleep scientists were skeptical at first. But then, in a remarkable piece of validation, a researcher named Thomas Weir conducted an experiment. He put volunteers in a situation that mimicked pre-industrial light conditions, 14 hours of darkness each night for a month. What happened? After a few weeks of adjustment, the volunteers fell into the same two-phase sleep pattern that E. Kirch had found in the historical record. First sleep, then a wakeful period, then second sleep. Their bodies freed from artificial light and schedule constraints reverted to what may be humanity's natural sleep architecture. This suggests that our modern pattern of consolidated sleep, 8 hours straight through the night, might actually be a relatively recent invention, a side effect of artificial lighting, allowing us to stay up later and conditioning us to expect continuous sleep. People in that dark bedroom in Massachusetts might well have experienced this biphasic sleep. They would have gone to bed around 8 or 9 in the evening, when darkness and fatigue made staying up pointless. By midnight or 1 in the morning, they might have woken Lane quietly in the darkness for an hour, then drifted back into second sleep until dawn. This pattern has its perks. That quiet, half-awake moment in the middle of the night often brings surprising mental clarity. Ideas drift in creativity wakes up, and thinking feels calmer and deeper than it ever does during the day. But in our modern world, if you wake in the middle of the night, it often triggers anxiety. You look at the clock, calculate how many hours of sleep you've gotten, worry about how many more you need. You might turn on a light which immediately suppresses whatever melatonin was helping you stay relaxed. You might check your phone, flooding your brain with blue light and probably stress-inducing information. All of this makes going back to sleep harder. What might have been a natural wake period becomes insomnia. Not because anything is wrong with you, but because you don't have the context to understand that waking in the night can be normal and okay. The people in the 1800s had that context. If they woke in the night, they didn't panic. They simply lay there in the darkness, perhaps thinking about the day past or the day ahead, perhaps listening to the sounds of the house, and the night perhaps saying prayers or just resting in the quiet. And when sleep returned, they welcomed it and moved into second sleep without resistance or fear. There's wisdom in this approach that's worth recovering. If you wake in the night and can't immediately fall back asleep, don't fight it. Don't turn on lights or check devices. Just lie there in the darkness. Breathe slowly. Let your mind wander where it will. Trust that sleep will return when it's ready. This is especially important if you're trying to build resilience for situations where normal routine is disrupted. In an emergency, in a power outage, in any situation where stress is high and conditions are unusual, sleep often becomes fragmented. Knowing that this is normal, that you can rest, even if you're not technically asleep, can prevent the spiral of anxiety that makes fragmented sleep turn into no sleep at all. Medieval peasants sleeping in their cold hovels, pioneers in their frontier cabins, sailors on long voyages. All of these people had to cope with sleep that was often interrupted by cold discomfort or the needs of the moment. What allowed them to function wasn't perfect sleep conditions, but rather a relaxed acceptance of imperfect sleep. They rested when they could, slept when sleep came, and didn't waste energy worrying about whether they were doing it right. This mental flexibility is as much a survival skill as knowing how to layer blankets or preserve food. When you can't control your circumstances, you need to be able to adapt your expectations. You need to be okay with good enough rather than perfect. Think about how you relate to your own sleep. Do you have rigid expectations about when you should sleep, how long you should sleep, what it should feel like? Do you track your sleep with devices, worrying about percentages of deep sleep and REM cycles? Do you lie awake calculating how many hours you have left before the alarm goes off? All of this monitoring and anxiety might actually make sleep worse. It certainly makes the experience of trying to sleep more stressful. Meanwhile, people who slept on straw mattresses in freezing rooms with no knowledge of sleep stages often slept better, simply because they expected nothing more than to rest when they were tired and work when they were awake. This isn't to say that we should abandon all knowledge of sleep science or that primitive conditions are better. But there's a balance to be found between using information to optimize sleep and becoming so focused on optimization that you create new problems. The darkness in that bedroom offered something that optimization can't: simplicity. When it's dark and there's nothing to do but sleep, sleep becomes uncomplicated. You're tired, you lie down, darkness signals safety and rest. Your body does what it's designed to do. You can recreate some of this simplicity even in the modern world. Make your bedroom dark, truly dark, with blackout curtains or an eye mask. Remove devices that emit light. Resist the urge to check the time if you wake. Create a space and a routine that says clearly and consistently, this is a place for rest and nothing else. When you do this, you align yourself with millions of years of human evolution and thousands of years of human culture. You step into a pattern that worked for your ancestors, that worked for those people sleeping in the cold bedroom, that still works whenever we allow it to. And you might find to your surprise that sleep becomes easier. Not because you've done anything complicated or technical, but because you've removed the complications. You've created the conditions for the simple, natural process of sleep to unfold without interference. Let yourself sink into that simplicity. Now, there's nothing you need to figure out, nothing you need to monitor or control. Just darkness and quiet, and the gentle drift towards sleep that happens when you stop resisting it. Your breathing has slowed. Your body has settled. The story of cold bedrooms and dark nights has woven itself around you, not as information to remember, but as an invitation to experience what they experienced, a quiet form of history to fall asleep, to meant to be felt rather than understood. You are where you need to be. The darkness, whether complete or partial, holds you safely. And sleep, that ancient friend of humanity, is near as patient and reliable as it was for every generation that came before you, waiting for you to let go and trust in its embrace. We've traveled a long way together tonight, back through nearly 2 centuries, to a small bedroom in Massachusetts, to a way of life that seems almost impossibly distant from our own. And yet, as we've explored the details of how people slept in the 1800s, patterns have emerged that speak across time that remain relevant, even in our world of central heating and electric lights. What have we learned? What threads can we gather from this tapestry of cold rooms and wool blankets and careful preparation? First, we've learned that comfort is not about eliminating all challenge, but about meeting challenge with appropriate response. The people in that bedroom didn't try to make winter not be winter. They didn't attempt to transform their cold house into a tropical paradise. Instead, they worked with the cold using small spaces, careful insulation, and layers of protection to create warmth where it mattered most. This principle scales. In your own life, you can't eliminate all difficulties, all discomfort, all sources of stress. But you can meet them intelligently. You can prepare for what you know is coming. You can build systems that work with reality rather than against it. Whether it's staying warm in winter, managing financial stress, or maintaining relationships, the approach of acceptance plus intelligent action serves you better than denial or fighting against what is. Second, we've learned that the human body is remarkably adaptable when given the chance to adapt. Cold habituation, the ability to function comfortably in temperatures that would be intolerable without practice, isn't magic. It's simply allowing your physiology to do what it evolved to do, respond to regular challenges by becoming more capable. This adaptation principle applies far beyond temperature regulation. Your mind adapts to cognitive challenges when you engage them regularly. Your emotional resilience builds when you face difficult situations and work through them. Your physical strength grows when you stress your muscles consistently. In every domain, adaptation requires exposure, not protection. In the context of winter survival skills, this means maintaining some baseline exposure to cold even when you don't strictly have to. Keep your house a bit cooler. Spend time outside. Allow your body to remember how to generate and preserve heat. This isn't about suffering. It's about maintaining capability so that when you need it, it's there. Third, we've learned that less can sometimes be more, that simplicity often works better than complexity. Those layers of wool blankets, that small room, that dark and quiet night, created conditions for sleep that our sophisticated modern bedrooms often fail to achieve, despite every technological advantage. This isn't an argument for returning to the 1800s. Modern medicine alone has extended our lifespans and reduced our suffering in ways that far outweigh any sleep advantages of pre-industrial life. But it is an argument for selective simplicity, for recognizing that some problems are better solved with basic approaches than with complex interventions. Can't sleep? Before you try a pharmaceutical solution or an expensive sleep tracking system, consider, is your bedroom dark enough, cool enough, quiet enough? Are you physically tired from activity during the day? Have you avoided screens for the last hour before bed? Sometimes the simple solutions, the ones that would have been obvious to someone in the 1800s, are the ones we most need. Fourth, we've learned that preparation matters. The ritual of warming the bed, of putting on sleep clothes, of checking the curtains and tucking the door cloth against drafts. All of this careful preparation created both physical readiness for sleep and psychological transition from day to night. In medieval times, in frontier cabins, in households across the centuries, people have understood that sleep doesn't just happen. You prepare for it. You create the conditions. You mark the transition with ritual and attention. This wisdom is as valid now as it ever was. Your own pre-sleep ritual might look different. You might not need a warming pan or a nightcap, but you do need something that signals to your brain that the day is ending and rest is coming. That might be dimming lights, reading a few pages of a book, doing some gentle stretches, or simply tidying the bedroom. The specific actions matter less than the consistency and intentionality. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, we've learned that what we think we need for comfort and survival is often very different from what we actually need. People in the 1800s would have thought our modern expectations of comfort bizarre. Heating an entire house to 70 degrees all winter. Sleeping in lightweight pajamas in a warm room. It would have seemed wasteful and unnecessary. And yet, we think we need these things. We believe we can't be comfortable without them. This gap between perceived need and actual need is worth examining because it reveals how much of our comfort is actually dependency. And dependency is the opposite of resilience. When you know you can be comfortable with less, when you've practiced it and proven it to yourself, you become more resilient. Not because you're tougher or better, but because you have more options. You can cope with a wider range of conditions. You're less vulnerable to disruptions in the systems you normally rely on. This is the heart of winter survival skills, whether we're talking about the 1800s or today. It's not about specific techniques, though those are valuable. It's about cultivating adaptability, maintaining capacity, preparing thoughtfully, and understanding that comfort is something you create through wise action, not something you purchase through dependency on fragile systems. The people sleeping in that cold bedroom understood this in their bones. They had to. Their survival depended on it winter after winter, through cold that could kill and darkness that lasted 15 hours. They met those challenges with layers of wool, small warm spaces, careful routines, and bodies and minds adapted to endure. We can honor their experience by learning from it, not by trying to recreate their hardships, which would be foolish nostalgia, but by extracting the principles that made their approach work and applying those principles in our own context. Make your bedroom a little darker, a little cooler. Add layers to your bedding. Establish a pre-sleep ritual. Maintain some cold adaptation. Accept that sleep might not always be perfect, and that's okay. Trust your body's wisdom about when to rest and when to wake. These small changes, individually modest, combine to create conditions where sleep becomes simpler, more natural, more reliable. Not through technology or optimization, but through alignment with how human bodies and minds have worked for thousands of years. As you lie here now, perhaps you feel some of that simplicity settling over you. The complications of the day, the worries about tomorrow, they're still there, but they seem less urgent somehow. The darkness holds them at a distance. The warmth around you asks only that you rest. This is what those people in Massachusetts felt night after night. This is what medieval peasants felt in their humble beds. This is what humans have felt whenever the day's work was done, and night offered its refuge. You're part of that long tradition, that unbroken chain of people seeking rest in the darkness, finding it waking, renewed to face another day. Let yourself be part of that tradition now. Let the lessons we've explored settle into your mind, not as facts to remember, but as truths to embody. You know how to rest. Your body knows. Your ancestors knew. And that knowing is still there waiting for you to trust it. Sleep is near now. Can you feel it? The way your thoughts are beginning to drift, to lose their sharp edges. The way your breathing has deepened without you deciding to change it. The way the boundaries between waking and sleeping are starting to blur. This is natural. This is right. This is exactly what's supposed to happen when you've prepared well, when conditions are right, when you stop resisting and allow the ancient rhythm of rest to carry you where you need to go. The house is utterly quiet now. The fire has faded to embers, the children breathe slow and deep, and outside the snow has stopped, leaving a sky sharp with cold, brilliant stars. In the bedroom, the temperature has settled. It's still cool, but no longer biting. Thick walls hold the day's last warmth and release it softly. The air is still. Under layers of wool and linen, the family rests. The husband's body has gone heavy with sleep. His wife's thoughts, once busy with bread and repairs, have loosened and drifted away. Waking slips towards sleep so gently, it's impossible to mark the moment it happens. The body simply knows. The heart slows muscles, let go, the mind quiets. They don't think about sleep, they trust it. In the dark, after enough stillness, it arrives on its own, steady and inevitable, like dawn, like breath, like snow settling into a field. And in this narrow space between effort and surrender, the day finally lets them go. First, there's the awareness of warmth. Not just physical warmth, though, that's certainly present, but a deeper sense of being held, protected, safe. The blankets over them are more than just insulation. They're a barrier against a world that can be harsh and unforgiving. They mark the boundary of a space that belongs to rest, to renewal, to the small death and rebirth that happens every night when consciousness lets go, and the deeper processes of healing and integration take over. Then there's the darkness, which by now has become not an absence, but a presence, a friend rather than a threat. In that complete darkness, the mind can finally stop processing visual information, that endless stream of data that occupies so much of our waking attention. Without anything to see, the visual cortex quiets down, and that quieting spreads to other parts of the brain. Thoughts become less verbal, more imagistic. Logic gives way to association. The boundaries between memory and imagination begin to blur. And there's the cold air on their faces, just the tip of the nose, and perhaps the cheeks exposed, while the rest of the body stays warm beneath the covers. This contrast is important. It provides just enough sensory input to confirm that the body is still connected to the world, still breathing, still alive, without being so intrusive that it prevents sleep. It's a reminder that you're not trying to eliminate all sensation, all awareness. You're simply allowing it to fade into the background while something else comes forward. What comes forward is difficult to describe in words because it's not primarily a verbal experience. It's a loosening and unraveling of the tight knot of self that you carry around all day. The constant monitoring of who you are, what you should be doing, how you're being perceived, all of that exhausting self-consciousness begins to dissolve. In its place comes something older, something more fundamental, a kind of trust, perhaps. A willingness to let the body and brain do their work without interference from the conscious will. This is what animals do instinctively when they sleep. They find a safe place, they settle in, and they let go. No second guessing, no anxiety about whether they're doing it right. Just the simple surrender to a process that has worked for millions of years. People in the 1800s, people in medieval times, people in every era before. We became so disconnected from our bodies and their rhythms, they had access to this surrender more easily than many of us do today. Not because they were wiser or more spiritual, but because their lives demanded it. When you've worked hard enough that your muscles ache, when you've been cold enough that warmth feels like a blessing, when darkness is complete and there's nothing to do but rest, surrender comes naturally. You can touch that same surrender now, even in your modern bed with all its comforts. You can let yourself sink into the support beneath you. Feel the weight of whatever covers you. Allow your breathing to find its own rhythm without trying to control it. Let's breathe together for a moment, you and I, and those people from long ago. Breathe in slowly through your nose, feeling the cool air enter. Hold it gently for just a moment at the top, then release it slowly through slightly parted lips, feeling your body settle a little deeper with the exhale. Again, in through the nose, cool and clean. A brief pause. Out through the mouth, warm and slow, letting go of something with each breath. Maybe tension, maybe thought, maybe just the need to be anywhere other than exactly where you are. And again, breathing in the way people have breathed for countless generations as they prepared for sleep. Drawing in the night air transformed slightly by the warmth of your own body, and releasing it back into the darkness, a small contribution to the endless cycle of breath that connects you to every living thing. The people in that bedroom are breathing this way now, though they're barely aware of it. Their breath has become automatic, effortless, each inhalation and exhalation a gentle wave that rocks them deeper into sleep. The husband's breath and the wife's breath have even begun to synchronize a phenomenon that sometimes happens with people who sleep close together, their bodies unconsciously coordinating their rhythms. Around them, the house breathes in its own quiet way. Wood shifts with the temperature walls, take in moisture and slowly give it back. The building feels alive, not biologically, but because materials once living still carry a trace of what they were. Wood remembers trees. Wool remembers sheep. In a way that's more poetic than scientific, these things seem to share in the rest inside them. It may sound fanciful, but no more so than the fact that you breathe air others once breathed, or carry water that was once cloud, river, and sea. You are not separate from the world, but woven into it. In sleep, That connection becomes easier to feel as the sense of separation gently fades. Notice now how your own thoughts have changed as we've moved through this night together. Earlier, you may have been following the narrative, closely thinking about the historical details, comparing your own life to theirs. But now, if you're still aware of the words at all, they've become more like a river you're floating in than a path you're walking. They carry you without requiring anything from you. This is exactly as it should be. This is the descent into sleep, the gentle falling that isn't really falling at all, but more like returning, like coming home to a place you've always known. The images that arise now might not make logical sense. You might see that bedroom in Massachusetts, or you might see your own bedroom, or some combination of the two. You might feel cold and warm at the same time. You might hear my voice, and also not hear it, the words becoming more like a texture than a message, more like the sound of wind in trees or rain on a roof. Let it all be exactly as it is. There's no wrong way to do this. Sleep will come in its own time, not because you've tried hard enough or relaxed correctly, but because your body knows what to do and has been doing it every night of your life. All you have to do is get out of the way. In that bedroom, the wife's last conscious thought is about tomorrow's bread. She needs to start the dough rising early if it's to be ready by midday. But even as the thought forms, it dissolves. Tomorrow will take care of itself. Right now, there's only this warmth, this darkness, this gentle drifting. The husband has already crossed over into true sleep, his breathing deep and even his body completely still, except for the slow rise and fall of his chest. The children are even deeper lost. In whatever dreams come to the young, their faces peaceful in the darkness. And you, wherever you are, whatever bed you're lying in, you're part of this too. Part of the same ancient pattern of waking and sleeping that has sustained humanity through ice ages, and plagues through wars, and winters through every conceivable hardship. Sleep has always been there, reliable and restorative, asking nothing but that you stop fighting and allow it to do its work. So, breathe now. One more slow breath in, drawing in peace, drawing in rest. Hold it gently and release it, letting go of every last bit of effort, every last attempt to control or manage or figure out. You are safe. The darkness holds you. The warmth surrounds you. And sleep, that old friend, that faithful companion, is here now, settling over you, like the final blanket, the one that makes everything complete. Let your eyes stay closed. Let your body rest. Let your mind drift where it will. You've done everything right. You've prepared well. You've learned what those people from long ago had to teach. And now it's time to simply rest. The night is long and deep. There's room in it for all the sleep you need. Room for dreams and stillness both. Room for the body to repair itself and the mind to sort through the day's experiences and file them away as memory. You don't have to do any of that consciously. It happens on its own in the background while you rest in the foreground. Trust the process. Trust your body. Trust the wisdom of countless generations who learned how to sleep in far more difficult conditions than you'll ever face. They would tell you, if they could, that sleep is not something to be achieved or earned. It's a gift that comes when you're ready to receive it. And you're ready now. Everything in you knows it. Your slowed breathing knows it. Your relaxed muscles know it. Your quiet mind knows it. So sleep now. Sleep deeply and well. Sleep as they slept in that cold bedroom so long ago, peacefully and completely knowing that morning would come and they would be ready for it. Sleep as humans have always slept, in trust and in surrender, in the darkness that precedes every dawn. Good night. And so, our journey comes full circle back from that cold bedroom in the past to your own warm comfort in the present. But you bring something back with you, don't you? Some understanding that wasn't there before. Some appreciation for the careful wisdom that allowed people to thrive in conditions we would find challenging. This is the value that the Warfield Prepper Chronicles offers. Not just historical facts, though we strive for accuracy in every detail. Not just survival techniques, though the practical knowledge we explore has been tested across generations and proven to work. What we offer is a deeper perspective on resilience, on adaptation, on the relationship between comfort and capability. If you've found value in tonight's exploration, I hope you'll take a moment when you wake in the morning, refreshed and rested, to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Share it with others who might benefit from these quiet journeys into the past, these meditations on how people lived and what we can learn from them. We're building a community here of people who understand that historical knowledge and practical preparedness go hand in hand. People who appreciate that the best way to face an uncertain future is to learn from a long past. People who find comfort not in dependency, but in capability, not in endless comfort, but in the confidence that comes from knowing you can endure discomfort if you must. There are more stories to tell, more winter nights to explore, more forgotten skills to rediscover. Each week, we journey together into the quiet corners of history where ordinary people solve the timeless problems of staying warm, staying fed, staying safe, and yes, sleeping soundly despite challenges that might keep us awake today. But for now, for tonight, let this be enough. Let the story of wool blankets and warming pans, of cold adaptation and natural darkness, let it all drift away into the background of your awareness. You don't need to remember the details. They've done their work simply by being told, by creating a space for your mind to rest while your body prepared for sleep. Outside your window, the world continues. Cars pass on distant roads. The wind moves through trees. Other people are awake working night shifts, or unable to sleep, or traveling through the dark. But none of that concerns you. You are where you should be doing what you should be doing. Resting, releasing the day, trusting that morning will come, and you'll be ready for it, restored by the sleep that even now is wrapping around you, like those layers of wool, warm and soft, and exactly what you need. The people in that bedroom in Massachusetts are long gone now. The house itself is probably gone, returned to the earth, or perhaps still standing, but transformed by modern renovations. But the peace they found in that small cold room on winter nights, that peace is still available, still waiting for anyone who knows how to prepare for it, how to create the conditions for it, how to let go and trust in the simple wisdom of rest. You've done that tonight. You've prepared well. And now, finally, completely, you can let go. Sleep well, my friend. Sleep deep and wake restored. And know that when winter comes again, whether literal or metaphorical, you carry within you the knowledge of how to meet it with wisdom, with preparation, with the quiet confidence of someone who understands that warmth is something you create, not something you demand. good night. Rest peacefully. And thank you for joining me on tonight's journey through the winter darkness, where we found together the light of human ingenuity and the warmth of lessons learned long ago but never forgotten. Until we meet again, this is Peter Miller, wishing you warm blankets, dark rooms, and the deep sleep that comes to those who know how to rest in the ancient way, the way that has always worked and always will.